Today, I'm joined by one of Seatrade's shortlist candidates for 20 under 40, joining us from Portsmouth, UK. Steve Jones is the Director of Fundraising and Operations with ORCA. He oversees all of ORCA's income generation operations, and he also manages their partnerships, working with industry and other stakeholders to help protect whales and dolphins around the world. ORCA is a UK-based whale and dolphin NGO that works with the cruise industry to monitor and protect whales and dolphins around the world. Steve works with the shipping industry to develop high-impact conservation projects addressing threats to large whales, such as ship strike, responsible whale watching, and commercial whaling. Steve also oversees ORCA's innovative Ocean Conservationist Programme, where the charity places professional conservationists on board cruise ships and ferries around the world to enrich the guest experience whilst conducting citizen science research to help us better understand some of the most important whale and dolphin habitats in the world. Welcome on board with us on the Cruise Pioneer podcast, Steve.
Thank you very much, Birgit. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so glad to have you.
Absolutely.
I first wanted to dive into your pioneer commitment. What is your personal commitment and the focus area that ORCA targets, and how did you get so devoted and dedicated in this field?
So ORCA's work is all around working in collaboration. We think that there is no way to solve some of the challenges addressing whales and dolphins unless we work together. And so we're really here to support the cruise industry in terms of making changes or actually making a net positive impact in terms of whale and dolphin conservation. And so for us, that's sort of at the core of everything we do. And at our heart, we're a scientific charity. Our work all focuses back on monitoring whales and dolphins around the world because they're so hard to study. It's so difficult to track them. And with all of these vessels out on the water already, it makes so much sense to use them to study these animals rather than actually going and dedicating sort of research trips and putting extra boats out and all of the impacts that they have. So that idea, which we call platforms of opportunity, is really at the core of our commitment. And so we start on the basis of what can a cruise ship be used for in terms of whale and dolphin conservation and work backwards from there. So that's the heart of what we do. Me personally, I actually was a big fan of the marine environment. At a young age, I wanted to be a marine biologist. Unfortunately, you then have to do quite well at school, and I didn't quite manage that. And so I worked in different industries for a long time. I worked in hospitality, I worked in sales and marketing, and event management. And then I started to volunteer on the board of a charity, and I really got the bug, and I was looking for opportunities to get into the NGO sector and use some of my business skills and the experience I'd developed to try and apply that to the charity. And then the opportunity came up at ORCA, and so 8 years ago I joined the charity, and here we are today. So I don't have a degree in marine biology, like many of the people involved at ORCA, and we're all about everyone who cares about whales and dolphins can play a role in protecting them. And I think I encompass that as much as anyone, because you don't have to be a scientist to help if you care and if you're passionate.
I totally agree with you on that. And I'm so excited to learn more about how you work with various cruise lines today, because last year we included you and the work as part of the Cruise Pioneers overview, where we are exploring how the large stakeholder, the cruise lines, are working with various commercial and non-profit innovators to move from pollutions and challenges into solutions and new opportunities. And can you share with us like highlights of which some of the cruise lines you're working with, how you specifically have progressed in this field over these past years, and some of the most exciting highlights in your work today?
Absolutely. And there are so many. We're really lucky. We have a lot of friends in the industry. We work with dozens of cruise brands in all different ways. So, it's very much just picking out a couple that really sort of come to mind and encapsulate what we do. We've been working with the cruise industry for 18 years. It's 18 years this year. And we started working with Saga Cruises. They're our longest running partner. They let us put volunteers on board their ships. ships and have done for the best part of 2 decades to study whales and dolphins around the world. And that's a really powerful example of actually how a company can do something really simple. They can just let scientists come on board and use those vessels as platforms to study the animals that they see and study those habitats. But as time has gone on through those 18 years and we've grown and developed, then some of the programs we run have become a bit more innovative or a little bit more complex. And so this year, for example, we're just coming towards the end of the Antarctic season, and where expedition cruise companies are starting to bring their ships back from the Southern Ocean and heading back up north for the Arctic season. And we've had teams on board with HX expeditions working around particularly South Georgia, which is an incredible place, the Serengeti of the South, around the southern part of the Southern Ocean. And the volunteers that we have on board doing monitoring around there in conjunction with the British Antarctic Survey and also the government of South Georgia to study whale density in coastal waters around South Georgia. And the reason that we want to do that is as populations have grown, there's more of a concern about animals being hit by ships in those areas. And so it's really important that we're understanding a baseline of where the animals can be found. And that's incredibly important. And these vessels are some of the only vessels that are heading south. The only other ships going down there really are krill fishing vessels and also the occasional research ship going down like the Sir David Attenborough. And so we really need to take an opportunity to use cruise ships in those environments as a platform to collect data that would otherwise be almost impossible to collect.
Yeah.
We're also doing a lot of work on vessel strike with companies more directly, so studying whales and their behaviour. And so for the past few years, we've had a marine mammal observer on board the bridge of the Queen Elizabeth with our friends at Cunard. And they've been looking at how whales interact with the ships, and in particular, what constitutes what we call a near-miss event. So one of the things that we know is that when whales are breeding or feeding or otherwise distracted looking after calves, they're much more likely to be hit by a ship. And in areas where there are lots of whales, it's really hard for the vessels to know how to navigate around the animals because we don't have a sense of how they respond and how they're likely to behave. So we have the Marine Mammal Observer on board for the entire Alaskan season, and particularly around Glacier Bay, but for the entire season start to finish. And they spend that time on the bridge of the ship monitoring animals as they come close to the vessel. We then work with leading scientists from organizations all over the world, some of the leading vessel strike experts who are working on this issue, to try and analyze that data and to try and get a sense of how ships should respond. And it's really interesting because the received wisdom was always, if there's an animal in the way, you have to let it make the decision and let it move. And actually through the work we've been doing in Alaska with Cunard, we've shown that actually ships can, if they're going slowly enough, maneuver around the animals safely and avoid them, which is a real potential game changer for bridge officers who might have to, face this challenge on a day-to-day basis.
Of course. And could you share with us a bit about kind of your if you have like key, very clear targets when it comes to the cruise sector and the work you've done so far? And are there any areas where you're like ahead of those targets, or are there any specific challenges or bottlenecks that you have been facing in this important work?
Absolutely. And I think that's there are always challenges and there's always things we want to do more. Our key objective when it comes to working with the cruise industry is really to help them to navigate their impacts on whales and dolphins. And so in many ways, every partnership has to be unique because every cruise brand is unique and they have different impacts. We know that vessel strike, which is an area we work a lot on, is something the cruise industry are struggling with and finding a challenge on a regular basis. We know that captivity for the cruise industry and the captivity of whales and dolphins is a problematic area because it is something that some brands will engage in, and that's out of kilter with the certainly public opinion in Europe, but increasingly in North America as well. And so working with brands to understand that and understand the risks of continuing sort of captive whale and dolphin excursions. Also working with destination specific issues. So if you go to destinations like Iceland or Norway, where there is commercial whaling still, there's very little domestic demand for commercial whaling in Norway and in Iceland. In Norway, it's less than 4% of people. In Iceland, it's less than 2% of people. And so the primary market for whale meat in those areas are tourists that are heading there. And actually, that's something that is really propping up these industries that are already heavily subsidized. And so the companies have an opportunity to tell their guests about some of these local issues and perhaps educate them into making, giving them the information they need to make the right decisions or better decisions based on their own ethics. This is where we're so excited about the work that we've been doing with brands like Ambassador as well, just to really take an opportunity for brands to give guests the opportunity to be responsible citizens when they travel, and to have a net positive impact as tourists.
Yeah, that's great input, because I mean, a lot of people knows maybe about tuna, shark fins, etc., but they might not be so aware when it comes to whales.
Absolutely.
And then I want to hear and dive even deeper into what we have introduced to the cruise industry as power couples. We really want to help inspire and educate the cruise industry and the largest stakeholders to understand the optimal dynamics of how the large corporate players can really partner up on a balanced level with smaller stakeholders. And I would like to hear a little bit more about the partnership and the power couple dynamics that you have explored with the Ambassador.
Absolutely, and I'm more than happy to talk about that, because Ambassador are such a good partner to us, and we do have a lot of partners, and sometimes it feels like picking your favorite child, but honestly we do love all of our partners. But the work we're doing with Ambassador is really impactful. So Ambassador, when they were first formed, or before they even launched, they reached out to us. They were interested particularly in the Faroe Islands, and there is a dolphin hunt there that goes on called the Grindadrap each year, and they were concerned about what would happen if they visit and then how it would work. And so we sat down with them and we talked about all of the different options. We talked about the Faroes, we talked about commercial whaling, we talked about subsistence whaling in different parts of the world. And at the end of it, they were so engaged and they were so passionate, and they were asking, what can we do next? And so we helped them to develop the cruise industry's first ever anti-whaling pledge, which is where Ambassador have put their hands up and said that they're opposed to whaling, just like we are, in all forms, and that they want to do their bit to try and prevent whales from being hunted and killed in the 21st century. So we do education on board to teach the guests going to some of these whaling nations about the impact of their decisions. We do work and lectures on board so that they can find out the reality of commercial and subsistence whaling. We also talk about the impact that historic whaling has had on whales, the millions of animals over around 100 years of commercial exploitation that were taken out of the oceans. And then we talk about the opportunities that those whales coming back will give for us in terms of climate change, the fact that whales are ecosystem engineers, that they can create phytoplankton blooms that can actually take carbon out of the atmosphere and put oxygen back in, just like trees. Every other breath we take comes from the ocean. It's 50% of the gaseous oxygen on Earth. So the ocean is just as important as the forests are, and whales are the farmers. They're the ecosystem engineers that are helping that ecosystem to thrive. So it's been a really fantastic journey to go on, because actually we've seen how, through educating the team and Christian Verhunig and Gordon Nardini and the rest of the team at Ambassador, who are so passionate about this, have really connected to this cause. And from there, we've been able to tell that story to all of the Ambassador guests, but also to tell that story in a wider way to people visiting some of these destinations. The other thing we found about that power couple dynamic, because as you've suggested, we're a small player. There's only 7 of us at ORCA in total. We have a network of people over the world, but there's only 7 of us in the office here. And one of the things we found with that power couple dynamic is that where we're small, we're able to be nimble and agile and evolve. And that's really played in our favor, because whilst the anti-whaling pledge is where we started, Ambassador also have an anti-captivity stance now, which is fantastic. They won't go to any destinations where there are captive marine mammals, which is a huge step forward and really, really powerful. We have our Ocean Conservationist Programme on board. We're on board about 1/3 of their itineraries. So, you've got a 1 in 3 chance, if you travel with Ambassador, of meeting an ORCA Ocean Conservation conservationists and them showing you whales and dolphins. And then we do plenty more beside that. This year we have a CEO cruise where ORCA CEO Sally Hamilton is traveling with Christian Vuhunig, the CEO of Ambassador, on a cruise to Norway. I'm going on board as well, but I'm not on the bill, so because no one's that interested in seeing me. But they're going to be talking about the partnership and also about the different organisations and the journeys that they've been on. And so it really has become, a multi-layered, multifaceted partnership. And on top of all of that, each year they give us a significant sort of cash donation to support our work as well. So, it's really multi-leveled. And I think that when it comes to power couples and when there is that imbalance of power, I think it's really important for the smaller partner in that to be dynamic and nimble and agile and make sure that they're able to respond to opportunities that might come about, because that creates many different strands to the relationship, and that means it's more resilient, and that means it's longer lasting. And we see a lot of partnerships between NGOs and companies where there's only one single point of collaboration, and then if there's a problem there, then the collaboration will end. Whereas if you can make multiple opportunities to work together, then you really build resilience for a longer term strategic partnership.
Absolutely. And I think those are great points to bring in. I assume, since we use the Cruise Pioneer focus to encourage cruise lines to pick up and gain inspiration from others, that there is definitely a great opportunity for more companies to sign the pledges and get on board on the first and early mover approaches of ambassadors and their competitors. And then I also wanted to hear a little bit more about unresolved pain points. Because, of course, obviously, you represent part of the value chain as an NGO and you work with a large stakeholders. But I would like to hear if you can share with us some specific area within your own operations where you see a clear opportunity to improve on smarter and better solutions to deliver on your commitment, and where you are interested in partnering up with either additional cruise lines, but also with other innovators and entrepreneurs to power couple further for radical high-tech solutions that can really enable us to solve the most critical issues around whales.
Definitely, such a good question, and you're right, everyone has unresolved pain points, and I think the one I want to focus on is actually a resource challenge that we've really been wrestling with over the last 18 months or so, and that's around the fact that so much of our work historically has been based around putting people on ships. Now, as I suggested, we're a small team, and putting people on ships is resource intensive, right? So whilst the partners we work with fund the programs, we obviously are able to therefore pay the Ocean Conservationists, there's still a lot of back-end resource that goes into that. And actually we found more and more that becomes a logistical, HR, a finance challenge that's really, really difficult to navigate. And so one of the things we've been working on over the last 18 months is really to drive value that we can get from our relationships with the industry that doesn't require us to put people physically on board the ships, but where we can deliver value in other ways. One really good example of that comes around using what we think is the silver bullet when it comes to protecting whales from vessel strike, which is the crew. We have these officers, and it's great for companies to have policies and procedures on protecting whales and reducing the risk of ship strike. But actually, the people navigating the ships, the people sailing the ships in all of these whale-rich waters around the world, they need to be a part of that conversation. They need to be engaged. And so last year, we started that journey by launching an e-learning platform where we launched courses that bridge officers can take to teach them about whale strike mitigation, so how to reduce the risk of whale collisions, and also to become seafaring monitors, so to actually collect data for ORCA that can be contributed back towards our work and feed into our conservation research. And so I guess it's not quite an unresolved pain point because we're on that journey, but we're at a very early stage of that journey. And we're finding now that each year we're training, thousands of seafarers on vessel strike mitigation, hundreds of seafarers to collect data for us, working with companies ranging from MSC Cruises to Disney Cruise Line to many more beside, who are actually taking this training so that their ships can minimize the impact on whales and dolphins, but more than that, have a positive contribution feeding back into our conservation research. And for us, it means it's so much less resource intensive. We're getting much better value out of that chain, and we're much able better to leverage those platforms of opportunities in a way that doesn't necessarily require us to put people on those ships.
Absolutely. And are you open to team up with other kind of more like tech innovators and entrepreneurs that are working within the span of like AI, citizen science, and other ways of both sourcing and utilizing data related to whales?
Absolutely. I mean, the great thing about us is that we have really one condition for working with us, which is that you care about whales and dolphins. So if people care about whales and dolphins, they should definitely ping me a message, because we're always open to looking at collaborations. And I think there is so much more that the industry can be doing, and so many opportunities, both for, operators themselves, but also, the wider ecosystem that the cruise family sort of embraces and encompasses. And many of those people will be in Miami at Sea Trade. And I know there's a lot of great work being done. So joined up thinking all the way. And if people want to help protect whales and dolphins, then we're all about working with them.
Excellent. That is great. And then you mentioned it kind of sort of, I mean, human capacities is really what it's all about, regardless of what we do, as long as we work with trying to scale solutions for the future. So I wanted to also check in with you on the part where we cover tomorrow's talents today, because we all need great humans on board with us to build a more sustainable and robust future. And I would love to hear your personal hack or advice to talents and fellow industry colleagues that are eager to get on board the Cruise Pioneer wave with us. What are the key capabilities, or the best advice that you have based on your own journey?
I mean, I think that for me, the most important thing is, if you're passionate about something, you have to be resilient, and you have to be willing to keep knocking on those doors and trying to push. I came into conservation late. I have a dream job, right? I get to go around the world talking to people about whales and dolphins. I get to go on ships and see whales and dolphins. I get to work in conservation, which you would have thought, having left university and gone into working in hospitality, people would never have thought I would have had that opportunity. But you find those opportunities in unusual or unexpected ways. And I think something about being a pioneer is about spotting the connections to the talents or the abilities or the skills and strengths that you have, and then finding ways, whether it's through just being persistent, or whether it's through doing volunteering, or whether it's through doing side hustles, or whatever it might be, to actually showcase those particular strengths that you have in a way that's appealing to the people that you might want to work with. So for us, when we talk about people in conservation, we get so many applicants from people who've done degrees, and that's fantastic. But what else makes them stand out? What volunteering have they done? What, customer service experience do they have? What else, makes them, that they can highlight as a transferable skill? And I would say the same for the cruise industry. If you want to be a cruise industry pioneer, you need to sort of stand above the crowd and showcase those little things about you that are different to everyone else, and find ways that you can really celebrate them. So that's the way I would approach it. If I was coming into the industry now, wanting to sort of make a splash, I'd find a small thing that makes me different, and then just find a way to shout about it in a way that attracts attention from all sorts of different stakeholders.
Those are, great input for our audience to bring back home with them. And Steve, we will be seeing each other live and in person quite soon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you too. It was an absolute pleasure.
Superb. And to everyone out there tuning in, make sure that you get on board with us also for the coming episodes.